Dr. Maria Scott is our next speaker.
Thanks, Bruce. As always, he gave us a lot to think about and gave us some perfect pearls as well as our marching orders in the next year. It'll be interesting to see what the next year becomes, and when we start talking next year at the meeting, how things have changed. I want to point out one thing about our president, Ralph Chu. Could you show everybody your socks? I don't know if anybody sees this. I'm sitting up here, and this guy is all in. You like his eyeball socks? Aren't they great? You know, actually, one of the things I think I came away with this, Bruce, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but size does matter, doesn't it? Sorry. So I think we all have a better understanding of this now and how innovation, planning, and execution are imperative to our success in the future. When I look at our own surgery center, many of you will probably look at the last 5 years, and none of you will probably say, I changed nothing. And the way innovation in my practice happened is, you know, we had the LensX, we had Aura, and I used to say I was a lean, mean operating machine, and I just bolted around the OR, but that was before Aura, LensX, and Toric. So Bolt is before Aura, LensX, and Toric, but then we changed things, innovated. Innovation brought more money to the practice, brought better patient outcomes, which I think is going to be huge for the future, and I think also brought better patient satisfaction to us. So we're going to move a little bit now to our next segment. And as Darwin stated, it's not the strongest of the species or the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that's most adaptable to change. So I'd like to introduce a video that was recorded last week. I had the honor of interviewing a man that has had a rags to riches life, and a man that has accomplished more in his career than most of us will ever imagine. And he has made a career and his fortune by adapting to change. And he has made me realize that I better get moving if I want to even achieve a tenth of what he's achieved in his lifetime. Good afternoon. My name is Maria Scott. I am a cataract and refractive surgeon for Chesapeake Eye Surgery Center and Chesapeake Eye Care and Laser Center. I am also an OOSS board member and an AAO counselor for OOSS. I am pleased to be joined today by Mr. Jim Heineman, successful hospital administrator and director of medical administration for TWA Nassau, a renowned entrepreneur and founder of a nursing home empire which led him to become a millionaire by the age of 35, a legendary football coach for Western Maryland McDaniel College, founder of Jiffy Lube International, founder of Youth Services International, which focused on rebuilding the lives of good kids who had done bad things, racehorse owner and breeder, a macular degeneration patient pioneer and patient advocate for the implantable miniature telescope by Vision Care Ophthalmic Technologies, and author of Was Blind, But Now I See. Mr. Hyman, you certainly have led an amazing life. Can you help me connect some of the dots in your early life?
Well, and I'm going to call you Marie if that's all right with you.
Please do, and I'll call you Jim.
I think that the beginning of my life was one certainly of turmoil. I was, raised in a boys and girls home, and I had a structured, disciplined life. And I think that the organization of my life led me to be an organized person. It led me to be a fighter. It let me learn how to lead people. And so those were the things that led to the characteristics that I was involved with, because they all involved, like you, in helping people. And so my mission has been to help people, and when I got macular degeneration, that became one that I wasn't ready to help with, but now I'm working on that with you.
Well, I think one of the things you mentioned in your book is you made your career in reading and assimilating lots of information quickly, and macular degeneration took that away from you.
Amen.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, as you know, I've said knowledge is power. And in order to gain knowledge, you have to read. I mean, I've been a big reader. I think that if I had one basic skill that I really, really enjoyed, it's reading. And now I have a Victor reader, which is a piece of equipment that I listen to coming down to your beautiful home. And when I couldn't read, I really felt helpless, you know, and then my attitude turned inward on me, and I withdrew and gave up, and you know, I was a mess. But I got better.
I think some of the isolation that comes with not being able to see is what I took away from your book. You know, feeling isolated and not wanting to socialize as much because you couldn't read the cues that you got from other people.
Right. I think that macular degeneration takes away your freedom of mobility and navigation, and you can't read the signs, and you know, it really does make you withdraw. It makes you want to say, I'm not going out there because I'm going to embarrass myself. I mean, more than once in going through that period where I was in denial, I've knocked over a bunch of dishes, and I've knocked over, you know, glasses that I misread the reach. And so when you have those kinds of experiences, you say, I'm not going to let that happen to me again, so I don't go.
Right.
You know, and that's why I got out of the horses. I loved my horses. I had really great happiness and success with it. And I mean, I hated to do it, but I knew I couldn't do it. And so had I been introduced to Vision Care's solution, you know, I would still be a contributor to society. I'd still have a business. I mean, when you look at the number of people who just give up driving,
right,
I mean, that's a huge impact. So we got to fix it.
Jib, let's talk about Jiffy Lube a little bit. I know that you found a need and you wanted to fill it, but you took something that was small and through planning and execution, you grew it. Can you explain a little bit more your process?
Yes, my process was exactly like Ray Kroc's in McDonald's. The McDonald brothers had a store in California, and everybody went there, and Ray Kroc was selling them malt mixers. And they kept buying more malt mixers. And he said, how are you doing this? And they said, well, we just serve these hamburgers and these potatoes, you know, shoestring potatoes or whatever. And so he thought it was so great, he said, why don't you expand it? And they said, no, we're happy, and they were older. And so he said, well, can I buy in or become part of it? So he goes to Chicago, he gets the rights to do something, and he's got the hamburger part down, but the potatoes won't cook right. So he calls and says, well, what am I doing wrong? The guy said, beats me. And so they look around a little further, and what they found out was that in Chicago, when he got his potatoes, he put them inside in a cellar or in a storeroom. And in California, they just threw them in an open surrounding bin, and they had the benefit of the sun drying out the potato, which is why it didn't work. So it's little things that do make a difference. But when I really started looking into it, and you have to do your research, you have to really study, you know, before you make a plan, you've got to get knowledge about it, and that means you got to read. And thankfully, these guys are putting more emphasis on reading. But in my research, I found that 154,000 corner garages had closed because without the gas money, they didn't have the cash flow to work and keep open. So there was the need. It was a pain in the neck to get your car oil changed. So we said, we're going to provide a convenient oil change. So you do it in 10 minutes. And it was a contrast. It wasn't actually 10 minutes. You know, that was a marketing ploy. But the point is, it was a heck of a lot closer than 3 days. And though there were takeoffs, the thing that we did it differently in that we built around the people, because at the end of the day, the people are what makes things go. It's just like in your organization. I mean, you've got to have good people around you. If you've got an assistant out there who alienates me as a patient, no matter how good you are, if I complain or whatever, I'm not as comfortable as I was before. And so we try to make it comfortable, we try to make it quick and convenient and reasonable in price. And so by doing that, we filled a need. But Pennzoil, when I went to them and said, I know that Quaker State is your big competitor, and I know that they have 27% market share from Boston to Norfolk, and you have 2% market share, and I can change that. How would you like to reverse that? Well, I got their attention. But how did I get it? I did the homework. I had the knowledge to see what would make them tick, you know? And it is a money world.
That's true. Today, we're filming this for many ambulatory surgery center surgeons, administrators, clinical staff, and industry partners. And as you know, we're facing challenging times. Can you give us any words of advice that would help us moving forward and helping us to plan and execute in these challenging times?
Well, the thing I learned along the way is that it's absolutely necessary to have no secrets. You can't have two agendas. Everybody's got to know the total agenda. They want to know where you're going. We always had the goal, we wanted to be the biggest and the best. We wanted to make it by region strong enough so that we could advertise and tell the world what we were doing. And in order to do that, you had to have a certain number of stores in a market. And so the other thing that we would do, we would celebrate our successes. You'll love this story. We had one here in Baltimore with the national meeting and headquarters for the show, and they had this demonstration, and this team won, and they all got rings like the Super Bowl rings because of my football connection, you know, and so it was really, everybody was having a great time, and I look over and there's a guy absolutely sobbing. So I get, who's that and what's going on? They said, that's the guy that trained these guys, and he didn't get a ring. Oh my God. So I gave him my ring. Not to make me happy, but to make him happy.
Right.
You know, and it's so important to include the trainers. It's so important to include everybody on that team, and then you want to make them famous.
Jim, I think one of the things that I would love to talk a little bit more about is execution, because a lot of people have great ideas, but the successful people are great executors. Can you share with me some of your secrets for that?
Yes. The execution begins with the leader. There's no way you can escape your role as the person with a vision, and then you've got to be there to help wherever you see the vision is missing or not understood. And in order to do that, you've got to be, you know, in your facility. You need to have written plans, written job descriptions, and that gives people a guideline to go by. And I think that execution will not take place in a vacuum. There has to be an awareness on the part of the people that you noticed. As the leader of any organization, the ability for the student or the player or the employee to feel like he noticed me or she noticed me is a very significant event. And so clearly everybody says, well, we'll do quarterly evaluations. But if you walk through there and you don't speak to anybody, or if you haven't got that kind of an atmosphere where they understand that everybody is spoken to at the beginning, and then in the rest of the time I'm going to move from point to point on a mission. And I think that understanding the person's individual difficulties is really important. I think that we've tried to find out what the people were trying to do beyond their job, and at least knowing about it and sharing. Like, if you know they're going on a fishing trip, how'd you do on your fishing trip? You know, we have staff meetings, and we have the purpose of going through items that everyone is interested in. And we look for new items that people would be, you know, encountering either in the business or in their personal life. But it's the same thing. I'm not saying that you got to be their buddy. I'm not saying that you've got to make a chummy relationship. But I think you got to like people. I think you got to want them to succeed. I think the idea that each and every one of them have a dream beyond what they're doing. And each and every one of them deserve to be aware that you want them to help get there. Because I always found they will replace themselves. If they're moving on, when we had a young lady who was basically a bookkeeper. And I found out that she was a career woman. She wanted to have a Jiffy Lube. Well, I made a real special effort to introduce her to a man who would be her landlord and build and own the building. And she went on and became a Jiffy Lube operator. And years later, I got a phone call from her, and she called to tell me that she won the Best There Is competition. And I'm saying, ain't it great? But she was proud to have done it. She was proud to let you know that, hey, I did everything that you thought I could do. And like we say, ain't it great? And I think that's what it is. I mean, people are like each and every one of us. They want to know, how am I doing? Right. You know? And they don't often hear about it. I mean, if you're too involved with Wall Street or you're too involved with your personal goals to ignore theirs, you ain't going to have a happy camp.
You're right. People like to be appreciated. We all do. Right?
You bet. You bet.
Absolutely.
So, and that's why I appreciate the work that you do, the work that Vision Care does.
Jim, your life, illustrious career, and never give up attitude is an inspiration to me and countless others. Let me see if I can sum up for the audience some of the pearls that you've shared with us today. When it comes to innovation, I think finding a need and knowing how to fill it is probably your key point. Mm-hmm. Planning, you need to be able to read and do the research and write it down. A plan that's not written is not a plan.
Amen.
And when it comes to execution, you need to share your goal with everyone, celebrate the successes, and find the right people and appreciate them.
Amen.
I really appreciate you spending your time with us today. It has been such a privilege to have this time, and I thank you for everything you've done for everyone. And being the spokesperson, I think, for the IMT is just another feather in your cap of such an illustrious career that you've given us so far.
Thank you.
Kent?
Maria, if I could introduce Mr. Jim Heineman.
Oh, fabulous. That was a surprise to me. Jim, I hope you'll stick around a little later, so I'm sure a lot of people have questions for you. I was so fortunate to spend the evening with him. I want to thank Kent and Ralph for giving me the opportunity. I think the older I get, the more humble I feel when you see greats like him. So thanks for your time, Jim. I really appreciate it. You gave me a lot of insights, and it's very interesting because we didn't really know what Bruce was going to say. and yet it tied so well. I'm sure Ken had something to do with that, but it really tied so well in just finding what the need is and filling it. And so as we move forward, I think we need to do that. And as Bruce said, you really have to do the research and make a plan, and then you have to go about executing it. So I think it was perfectly tied together. Thank you so much. I think we're going to move on. Kent, is that okay? I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Regina Bohr. She is president of Progressive Surgical Solutions, and she's going to talk to us about quality strategies beyond compliance.
Thank you very much. In my role as a consultant with surgery centers for almost 30 years now, I've had just a really unique and a great opportunity to work with surgery centers, hundreds of surgery centers across the country. And in many instances, it's actually been a privilege because I've been able to see real top performers and places that just stand alone. They're set apart. And so in thinking about what we're all talking about today, I just sort of reflected on what is it? What makes the difference? And I have some pretty strong feelings about it. I know when Nordstrom's came to Southern California, and I first started shopping at Nordstrom's, and even I think everybody's had that experience. You go someplace where they just get it right, and you wonder, why doesn't everybody do it right? It's just not that hard to make such a remarkable difference in the way that you deliver whatever it is that you're doing. So we're going to talk a little bit about beyond compliance, which is usually what they ask me to talk about, which is compliance, which is what nobody wants to talk about and everybody's sick of talking about, and is really, for the most part, I think, perceived by many of us, almost all of us, as just an ever-increasing burden, the burden of maintaining compliance. And I think in a lot of cases that burden is sort of gotten to physician leaders in surgery centers. I think oftentimes I get feedback from surgeons that they really feel resentful about it. They feel like there's all these layers and requirements and documentation and steps in the process that they've had to comply with that they don't really feel directly contribute to quality or make a difference in the quality. But I think what I see sometimes is that when a physician allows themselves to sort of adopt that mindset or to develop that attitude, it actually detracts from the quality because it detracts from the quality of life in the entire organization. So this is just a quote from Christopher Columbus. By prevailing over all obstacles and distractions, one may unfailingly arrive at his chosen goals or destinations. And that's, I think, we need to not allow ourselves to be distracted, whether it's by we've talked all afternoon about what a dynamic and ever-changing environment we're in. But to Bruce's point, we need to have the clarity of how do we work within our center to make our center a top-performing center. And, there's approximately 6,000 surgery centers across the country. Most of them are average performing centers. So we want to be a top performing center, and what does that look like? It's kind of hard. This is the distraction part. This is our healthcare system under Obamacare. This is the model that was published after the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. And it's like in this kind of chaos and amidst all of this confusion, we need to still try to find clarity, and we need to focus on what's important to really make a difference in our centers and our centers' performance and ultimately for our patients and their experience. So how do you do that? I think it's really important, and we see a lot of times that surgery centers don't take the time to do this. I mean, the reality is that most of you as surgeons and even administrators, you live most of your life in the practice, and the practice takes up a lot of your focus. And the surgery center really is its own organization. And so really defining what your mission is in the surgery center, I think, is important. It goes to Bruce's point of providing clarity. What's your mission? What are your core values? And what's your culture statement? And to what Maria talked about, everyone needs to know there needs to be a written plan. This becomes the blueprint to define who we are, how we operate, and what our goals are. This was from a World Health report, and I can barely see it, but the most important thing is, again, to Mr. Heineman's point, it's the people. It's the people that make the difference. And focusing on the people, investing in the people, even just caring about the people or communicating that you care about the people, I find makes a huge difference in the quality of the environment, the quality of life in the workplace. And that translates into the level of motivation, into the performance of your staff. This is Dr. Novick from Newport Bay. I have the privilege to work with Newport Bay Surgery Center. They're one of our clients. This is our culture statement at Newport Bay. And I really can't see. This is tough. But we understand our staff is our greatest asset. We strive to foster a culture based on mutual respect and accountability. And I think that mutual respect and accountability, one of the things I can tell you as a nurse of over 35 years, one of the things that draws clinical staff into a surgery center environment and out of the hospital is getting away from that very top-down kind of relationship between doctors and nurses, surgeons and nurses, and having an environment where there is a more collegial relationship, mutual respect amongst all the team members in the environment is a huge draw for quality, high-quality staff. So really remembering that, not forgetting that, not, maintaining control even in stressful situations in the OR, I think it's a really important point because it goes to treating people with mutual respect. When we treat each other well, our patient experience is enhanced. We hold each other accountable. We accept our work leaves little room for error or inaccuracy. We appreciate the gravity of what we do through surgical procedures to improve vision. We are privileged to contribute to improved quality of life for our patients and their families. And again, having a statement like this is a way of pulling your entire staff in. I mean, we have this framed and in a very large frame right when you walk into our facility. Every single person in that staff walks by this culture statement every day. And our surgeons see it, our guests see it, our patients see it, and our staff sees it. And we want to live it, and that's the reason why we have it posted, and we constantly go back to it. So what's the secret sauce between the average and the top-performing centers? In my observation, it's leadership. It's engaged leadership, and specifically engaged leadership by the owners, by the surgeon owners and the governing body. So what does that look like when you commit to leadership? What does that look like? It means that as a governing body, you're forced to be involved because, we got all those Medicare conditions for coverage that have that whole condition and all those standards related to governing body and management. But what does it really look like? It means really taking an interest in and really being engaged. First of all, showing up at the meetings, asking good questions. When issues and challenges and problems are brought in front of you through your QAPI reports and everything else, assuming the leadership to address them, not just brushing things under the rug, but actually providing the leadership to really address the quality issues, because that's what shows your commitment to that culture, to your objectives, to your vision, to your mission. Qualified managers, I can't say enough about the difference between people who are willing to invest, and I realize sometimes it's a struggle depending on where you are. It's a struggle to just find a really high-quality, competent business and clinical leader for your surgery centers. But the difference between surgery centers that don't have a really competent and effective clinical leader and surgery centers that do is like night and day. I mean, whenever I help a center recruit for their lead positions, both on the business and the clinical side, I look for people that are future industry leaders. I don't care if they necessarily come with all of that background and experience to the position, but I want them to see that this is a phenomenal opportunity and that we will invest in them to be a future leader in this industry. I want everyone that's in a lead position to be somebody that I expect to see on the podium within 5 to 10 years. And that's the way that we invest in them and treat them. And I think it makes a huge difference. That means you've got to have a staff development plan for your lead people in particular. You've got to support sending them to industry meetings that are relevant. Again, it goes to Jim's point, knowledge. Knowledge is everything. You can't be successful in an environment as complex as the one in which we operate if you're not constantly gaining new knowledge. Information explodes. I don't know what the statistic is, but it's ridiculous. Support your managers. When your managers come to you with an issue, and don't just, again, shove it under the rug. Support your managers in dealing with the tough issues. And in some cases, that doesn't mean that you go solve it for them, but you at least provide the leadership, the counsel, the mentoring, and the support to help them know how to go and solve it or address it themselves. A lot of times, these people, they just need to know you have their back. And then they'll be confident to go and deal with the problem. But if they don't think that you, as the owner, as the formal and informal leader of the organization, have their back on that, it's a formula for failure. I mean, they can't win. Invest in your people. Employee surveys, I think, are invaluable. I don't know how many people. I mean, how many people in here have done an employee satisfaction survey within the last? Oh, that's awesome. Within the last 5 years. Great. I think those are really important. It's really important to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in your facility that way. And most importantly, lead by example. Desire is the key to motivation, but it's determination and commitment to an unrelenting pursuit of your goal, a commitment to excellence that will enable you to attain the success you seek. Again, nothing happens by magic or by accident. You know, back to Mr. Heinemann's point, you have to have a plan, you have to be committed, and you have to execute. You have to demonstrate by example and through your behavior on a daily basis. Commit to patient safety. This is another huge thing. And as much as everybody, as much as we get frustrated by the regulations and the commitment and the conditions for coverage, they really are. I mean, the whole thing about the pre-surgical evaluation, about the timeout in the OR, the team pause, about authenticated orders. No nurse should be intervening in any way with a patient if they don't have authenticated physician orders. I mean, these are things that they may seem like a nuisance to you, and I guess what I would like to challenge you is if you could just flip your mindset just a little bit and see that this is all part of contributing to that ultimate goal of having a top-performing center, which means that you don't have that occasional medication error or wrong IOL implant or the myriad of other things that can go wrong. We've talked about the volume, about the demand for what we do. Our volume is just going to continue to increase exponentially. As it does, because what we do, so much of it is cataract surgery, the opportunity for error is huge. If you don't have quality people and you're not willing to participate actively in those key processes that are so vital and critical to assuring patient safety, you will have some bad outcomes. I mean, it's just it's a numbers game, right? So commit to that. And again, lead by example. Nothing can stop the man with the right mental attitude from achieving his goal. Nothing on earth can help the man with the wrong mental attitude. And again, I think that it's all that background noise of the dynamics and the changes and the challenges that are going on in the environment in which we live and work and breathe. We can't let that distract us. We've got to stay focused on the goal. So the other thing is commit to QAPI. I mean, you have to. Mike talked about it. Quality reporting is here to stay. We know that we deliver high-quality services, but you've got to commit to being able to gather the data and document the outcomes and document your QAPI activities and efforts. Obviously you have to do it for compliance, but we also need to do it. Why wouldn't we do it? We've got such a great story to tell, and we've got such good. We're nothing but a success story. So let's just rock it out here and get it all documented and make sure that we've got that in our armamentarium in order to present our case, whether it's to a payer, to a health system, to a potential suitor to buy a piece of our equity in our center, whomever it is. Engage in setting priorities and goals and confront peer review issues. That's all part of your QAPI program. And if you have peer review issues, we really need to deal with them. And it's delicate, it's difficult, but again, that's what leadership calls for, right? Everybody can have the easy conversations. It's having the leadership and having the courage to have the more difficult conversations. That's what defines a leader. Be a yardstick of quality. Some people aren't used to an environment where excellence is expected. This is a quote from Steve Jobs. I know I was really impacted by Steve Jobs' biography. It was just mind-blowing to me to read that book and to realize, it all happened in my lifetime, and this truly is one man who changed the world. He absolutely transformed the world. And so I figured, what better than to just hear it from the horse's mouth.
So the thing I would say is, when you grow up, you tend to get told that the world is the way it is, and your life is just to live your life inside the world, try not to bash into the walls too much, try to have a nice family life, have fun, save a little money. But life, that's a very limited life. Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact, and that is everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it. You can influence it. You can build your own things that other people can use. And the minute that you understand that you can poke life and actually something will, if you push in, something will pop out the other side, that you can change it, you can mold it. That's maybe the most important thing, is to shake off this erroneous notion that life is there and you're just going to live in it, versus embrace it, change it, improve it, make your mark upon it. I think that's very important. And however you learn that, once you learn it, you'll want to change life and make it better, because it's kind of messed up in a lot of ways. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again.
And that's it. That is the difference between an average and a top-performing center. It's you. And it's you being willing to step up and assume that leadership role, be actively engaged, invest in your people, make a blueprint, adopt a culture, mission, and vision statement, and that's the secret sauce. Thank you. And last but not least, someone who needs no introduction, Kevin Corcoran is going to talk to us about reimbursement.
Thank you all for having me. This has been, I don't know about you, but this has been an amazing session. And coming at the very end, I feel practically without words. Kent invited me to talk about a subject that's important to me, which would be the future of ambulatory surgery centers, payments. And in many ways, I think when he challenges us to do this, we do our research, we come to these programs with PowerPoint, but there is one thing he never tells us: everybody else's PowerPoint. So lo and behold, I find myself in an interesting position. A lot of the things I'm going to say have already been said, or Bruce said them incredibly eloquently, and I get to live in his shadow, which is hard to do, by the way. So having said that, I'm going to do a future focus sort of a presentation looking ahead. Part of this was a really elongated research project for me over a number of days. So this, although it's a very short presentation, took dozens of hours just to prepare it. But for many of you that are executives, managers, the single most important thing you probably do when you're trying to lead is to plan. And to do that homework, to figure out where you're going, is very, very time-consuming. So I'm going to give you a lens to look at the future in terms of how this might play out over time. And to an enormous degree, this has a very, very positive ending. There's a very happy set of coincidences that exist for this audience that make the story turn out well. But along the way, you got to realize a few things that are fairly difficult. So to begin with, yes, of course, I'm a consultant. I'm not here to sell anybody anything, but I do have an interest in the topic. So begin with this. It's simply the concept of the perfect storm. As you look at healthcare in the United States, the perfect storm is an analogy. It works well to describe the major things you're confronting, and before you can come to any answers, you basically have to know what the problem is. So the perfect storm begins with, we are a country with a growing demand for healthcare. We're an aging country. When you look at yourself, one of the things you see is a few more gray hairs. I certainly do. And lo and behold, when that happens, you realize there's going to be a heck of a lot of people that need care. The other thing, and I've been privileged to be in ophthalmology for nearly 40 years, there are exactly the same number of ophthalmologists today as there were 40 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, do you really think that's going to change? Here's an interesting statistic. A third of all ophthalmologists are over 60 years old. Think about what that means. So item number 2 up there, the supply of physicians is not growing, it's shrinking. And item number 3, the United States is an incredibly rich country. Some would say the richest country on the world. But the interesting part is we are not a country with infinite resources. We have finite resources, and therefore we cannot expect that they will expand forever. So we are a country on a budget, and that has been one of the discussions over the last 8, 10, 20 years in terms of what we should spend on healthcare. So the perfect storm, quite simply, is you got a lot more demand, nobody to help you do it, and the same amount of money. That would be a challenge. So let's look at it. This is the 100-year plan. So as you look at those numbers, and you only see this when you plot it on a 100-year cycle, the population of the United States is linear. It grows the same every single year, and it's pretty much always been that way. It's not changing very much. But the bottom curve is interesting. And it's the elderly population, and it's not linear. It has a kink. As a result, the dramatic piece of information from that is we are disproportionately aging. That has an impact on Medicare, has an impact on Social Security. It will certainly be a topic of discussion at this upcoming election. But we are an aging country. Here's the next part. When you look at Medicare and you drill down into it a little bit, there's some strange things going on here. The Medicare Part B program has been flat for more than 10 years and is unlikely to ever grow. Interestingly enough, I had a birthday this past week. I got one of those really big birthdays, never mind which one. And having said that, all of a sudden my box is full of mail from the Social Security Administration wanting to know which Medicare program I want to sign up for. There is none for Part B Medicare. There is tons for Part C. If you never advertise, you never get any customers. Part C is advertising like crazy, and they're growing. Do you suppose that Part C is as friendly to you in this room as Part B has been? And the answer to that is quite simply no. They will not be as friendly. They function more like a real business, and Part B functions more like government. So lo and behold, Part C is the growing organization, and their impact on the way you run is going to be very much more dramatic as time goes by. Well, what's going to grow? Well, all of those things are going to grow. We're a country with a lot more retinal disease, a lot more cataracts, a lot more glaucoma, and certainly, unfortunately, we're a fat country. So we're going to have a lot more diabetics, and that's a shame. But the surge in eye care demand is nothing short of amazing. When you build the model and realize how much this is going to grow, these are truly staggering numbers. This is number of cataract procedures. Many, many years ago, 35 to be precise. I used to be the custodian of all the information for a J&J company, long since extinct, which is IOLAB, and I was in charge of those numbers. There was a certain pace of those numbers in those days, and interestingly enough, when you plot it over this period of time, you can see it quite clearly. So in addition to an aging population, the number of cataracts we're going to grow is increasing dramatically, but we don't have any more surgeons to do it. These are the actual numbers. I actually went back and dug this out of CMS's database for calendar year 2013, the most recent year for which we have the numbers. But there were 1.28 million cataracts done in ambulatory surgery centers for Part B alone. The other number is less public, but you can derive it, and there were 1.1, let's say, other million cataracts done by all other payers, and in total, there were almost 2.4 million cataracts done in ambulatory surgery centers out of a total of 3.4 million. So 69%, almost 70% of all cataract surgery is done in ambulatory surgery centers as of 2013. My prediction for that would be that number will grow. The 69% is likely to reach 70, 80, 85. It'll never be 100. But many of the points that have been made during this excellent program really point to that growth. But as you look at it and break it down, the interesting part is Part B Medicare, the part we've been used to all these years and always refer to, is only half of the story. The Medicaid population, interestingly enough, is a huge and probably understated piece. To put a little more fine point on this, as you look at ophthalmology in terms of what the demand is and how many we have, the picture's not pretty. So my friend at Long Island Eye needs a few more PAs trained. We've done a talk together. It's a tom-tom I keep beating, and I would have to say, you're never going to get an optometrist to come and help you do surgery, but you could get a PA. So give that some thought. This is some ugly numbers. Now for some politics. Does the Affordable Care Act actually contain within it a solution to healthcare spending in the United States? How many of you think this mammoth political innovation does actually have the answer? An astounding show of hands. I actually did the numbers, pretending I was a policy wonk in Congress. The BTC up there is called bend the curve. That is the notion that we could actually impact healthcare spending in the United States to some significant degree. The red line says it won't get any worse. Notice the degree of optimism here. We're either going to stay the same or we're going to improve it. I didn't even give you worst case. Look at the blue line and the red line. Is there much difference? And the answer is almost none. So unfortunately, the answer, ladies and gentlemen, as we sit here today, is we're spending about $10,000 for every man, woman, and child in the United States on health care. I'm an employer with a little over 20 people. I feel that number rather acutely. I pay it. Lo and behold, what's my estimation for roughly 5 to 10 years hence? And the answer is the number grows to almost $15,000 per head. So most of you who are employers, if you factored in an extra $5,000 per year for every person you have on your payroll, would that be a deal breaker? And the answer is it might be. But that's where we're headed. So when I said we're running out of money, this is the way we run out of money. This is what it looks like. So if you extend these lines out, they continue to grow. They get to $20,000. Well, let's think about it for a second. The average person in the United States who works makes somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000 all in. And you propose to add $10,000, $15,000, or $20,000 to that number? That's a deal breaker. That does not work. So this says opportunity all over it, as Bruce likes to say. So what are our challenges? We're not likely to see a big payment increase. Over the next 4 or 5 years, that number is likely to be flat. I don't expect these numbers will be bad news for you, and they're not draconian like we usually do with SGR. None of that is taking place, but I don't see, based on everything I've calculated here, that we're going to have big payment increases. We do, however, have an evolving healthcare payment model. It's chaotic. We throw everything into the soup. Let's try a little bundling. Let's try a little capitation. Let's try a little of this. Let's try a little of that. Have we tried all these things in the last 25 years? Oh, heck yeah. How well did they work out the last time? Not so well. So the thinking process is you're going to have to plan to deal with these because they're going to deal you these cards. And the shifting enrollment to Part C is probably the best kept secret of the whole works. Part C is the elephant in the room. That one's going to get really, really big. What is it about ASCs that have an advantage? And we've heard it here, so I feel like I'm telling you a story you've already heard. But physician investment, physician commitment is huge. Do we have physician investment in hospitals? Not so much. Do we have huge physician commitment to hospitals? Not so much. But when it's an ASC, they feel it. They feel it very, very closely. And the people in this room are testimony to that. We also have some actual efficiencies in time and supplies. Is it your aspiration for your patients that they have a 2-hour cataract surgery? If so, let's go to a hospital. Is it your aspiration that they get out of there fairly quickly with as little fuss and muss as possible? And the answer is, of course. That's what you deliver. That's quite a story. Medicare payment rates. The fun part of this slide is the drama with which it shows you the differences between what a hospital facility fee is for the 4 most common procedures we do in ophthalmology versus the blue stuff, which is how does it work in an ambulatory surgery center. Those are some pretty dramatic numbers. So do you have an advantage, not just in terms of commitment, but in terms of dollars and cents? And the answer is yes, and we've heard that a couple of times. Threats. We like to do SWOT analysis. We value that as much as Bruce does, and threats turn out to be one of those things that really get the conversation going. So as you look at threats and you ask yourself, what is it that people feel? The regulatory ones are probably some of the worst ones. A HIPAA violation. Anybody know what the fine is for a HIPAA violation? It's a 7-digit number. To our company, a HIPAA violation would bankrupt us. It's that scary. So when you think in terms of big threats, that's number one. So leaks inside of your organization in terms of computers or EMRs, those could be catastrophic. Mandatory compliance programs. They're irritating. I think Regina said it very, very well. We'd like to go beyond compliance, but we do have to do compliance. So lo and behold, that's a big one. Payer investigations. In the last 5 to 6 years, that number has increased dramatically. And so we're likely to see more of that sort of thing. One of the simplest ones for you, since you do cataract surgery, is do you have within your ambulatory surgery center a reason for doing that cataract surgery? That needs to be part of your records. If there is no reason, there is a recovery process for getting that back at carriers. Palmetto in the Carolinas did such a study and found that for 95% of the second cataract surgeries on the same patient, there was no reason to do it. 95%. That is an abysmal number when you think about it. So think in terms of, is it a cheap shot to shoot at you in the compliance arena, and let's make sure we don't take too many cheap shots, because these get to be fairly expensive. The regulatory environment is complex. It's mutable in the sense of changing all the time. It's certainly very scary. It's costly, and it's terribly time-consuming. All of those are big threats for you. The economic outlook. If you're looking to make a plan, you do have to guess what our environment is economically. We do have flat reimbursement. We're not likely to have lower overhead. If anything, overhead is likely to go up. People like raises. Capital requirements continue to increase. We have increasing taxes. And from an overall look in the rearview mirror, this has been an extremely volatile year in terms of stocks. If you're looking at it and you're saying, well, is next year likely to be better? Everybody tells me in an election year it gets worse, not better. So I would think things are going to get a little bit shaky. So in conclusion, what can I tell you? The U.S. population is getting older. There is more demand, not less, and it's dramatically more demand. Physician supply is not increasing. If anything, it's shrinking. One of the fastest ways you can get physicians to quit is to beat on them. So beat on physicians through the regulatory process, and they say, I've had enough. So we could lose physicians over that. Spending on healthcare is indeed increasing, and I just showed you how. It's growing from $10,000 per head to $20,000 per head in a decade. Those are huge numbers. Consumers are looking for better healthcare, but they got to be able to afford it. They can't go broke in the process. There's a lot of burdensome regulation, and every day somebody comes up with a new rule. And responding to these pressures, as we just heard through this very eloquent meeting, takes leadership, takes a plan, and takes some strength. These are all the things you have to have. So what is the ASC story? This is fun to give this as the last slide. The ASC story is you have high quality, the best. Doesn't get better. You have reliability. It's amazing how consistent it is. You're economical. As we've heard over and over again, you're a lot less than the corresponding thing in a hospital. You're committed. And finally, you're friendly. It's fun to have you guys as friends. Thank you for your time and attention.
With that, a mind frame.
Mind frame.
A mind frame.
This is another frickin' breadcrumb that the guy's dropping for me. This is good. I like these challenges. First of all, and this will just take 60 seconds, I want to, again, thank Maria, Scott, and Jim. That was fantastic, and I really, really appreciate that. And it helped. By the way, I have one thing in common with Jim. It's a little known factoid about me that most of you probably don't know. But I also breed and raise thoroughbreds. So, Jim, thumbs up. We love our horses. They're expensive, but we love them. Our job, when we do a session like this, and whenever I get an opportunity like this to share and be with all of you guys, I usually focus on a few things, and I feel this is my responsibility. Based upon my experiences, the incredible opportunities I've had in my career and lifetime, to be able to share those with you. But truthfully, what Jim and Maria did reinforced for me. Number one, my job is to educate. And I think Jim gave us great direction in that regard, that you can't really put that plan together until you're sufficiently educated. But it can't stop there. The two other components that are, I think, essential for us, and I think our speakers today did a fantastic job with, is we need to motivate you guys to think, and we need to inspire you to act. And I really feel like today, I know I'm inspired. I know, as Maria articulated at the end of her comments, just having the incredible fortune, to work with such fantastic colleagues, but to have access to these amazing resources, it's very inspiring. The world, it is in healthcare, complicated, but truthfully, I look at that as I really do look at that as an opportunity. And sometimes I'm critiqued for that, and that's okay. I've got very thick skin. But one thing about this group and this audience, and I know this about myself as well, is that you're actually intensely competitive. This is actually a fairly competitive group of individuals that actually has kind of a little bit of a fire in the belly. I get that. And when I think about things for myself that have helped to kind of push me forward, I'm intensely competitive, for those of you who don't know that. But I look at all of these things we've discussed today. I don't react to any of them. I just take them all in the proper context, and I just kind of try to fit them into, again, my business, my practice, my locale, because in 30-plus years, it hasn't changed. All the action is still happening right in your primary and secondary service areas. And nobody knows that better than you do, and you have the best product. So I just embrace that. I hope you've had a great, great afternoon. I'm going to bring Ralph up to finish for us, but thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Bruce. 30 seconds. Thank you all for staying for this great program. Thank you to all our great speaker and panelists. I thought it was a fantastic afternoon. I learned a lot. Thank you again, Kent and Donna. I'd like to thank also Alcon for helping to make this afternoon possible. And then, Kent, let these things fly.
Okay, let's let them fly. And as you leave, Mr. Heineman and your friends at Vision Care are making his book available to you as a gift.
Oh, that's great.
So they're out in the hallway. So
One,
let her
two,
fly.
1, 2, 3, let them roll.